I just had a conversation the other day with somebody who was interested in working with me, and they own two different properties. They own one property in Albany, New York, and this property is a duplex. They've owned it for many years. They used to live in Albany. They lived in one side of this duplex, and then they decided to move down to South Carolina. And when they were moving, they decided instead of selling this duplex, they were going to hold on to it, and they were going to turn both sides into short-term rentals. And so they've owned that property for many years since moving, and it's cash flowed on a monthly basis several $1,000s per month for this one really affordable duplex that they kind of just happened upon as a short-term rental just because they were moving. Since then, they got the short-term rental bug because this has been so profitable, and they decided that they were going to upgrade their short-term rental portfolio and buy one of these fancy short-term rentals that everybody's talking about, that over the last few years, everyone's been clamoring for these high-end short-term rentals in these mainstream few short-term rental markets that everyone seems to be competing over. And so they decided to buy this fancy cabin in the woods. It's in the mountains of North Carolina in a very competitive short-term rental market. They paid over $800,000 for this property, and it's a beautiful property. They showed me the listing. It is top-notch. It's got all the amenities. This property, since they bought it 9 months ago, however, has lost or broken even every single month in terms of net cash flow on a monthly basis. So they have yet to turn a profit over the last 9 months of owning this property, and they don't see how that's going to change anytime soon unless interest rates really drop and they're able to refinance this property at a much lower interest rate. So the thought process was that if we own this blah type property in Albany that cash flows several $1,000s as a duplex, then of course we're going to make much more net cash flow on this property that's really fancy in the mountains of North Carolina where everybody would want a vacation, right? And that just isn't how it works. I talk about this a lot, but I think it's so important to identify what your goal is when buying short-term rentals. I think of the Airbnb opportunity that exists today very similarly to if you were going to go on a really long hike and you don't bring enough food or water, but you're hiking for a really long time, and so you're getting dehydrated, you're getting hungry, and all of a sudden you come to this giant apple tree that's got all these ripe, juicy apples all over it. It's like the opportunity of a lifetime. It's literally going to save your life. So even though there's apples all over this tree, ironically, the most nutritious, the most satisfying, the ones that are going to help you the most are the ones that are all within reach, all the ones at the bottom of the tree. But all the way at the top of the tree, there's a few apples that are really big, and they're beautiful apples, but they're less nutritious, less juicy, but these are like the status symbol apples, right? It'd be cool to get these apples. So the majority of people spend time and energy climbing past all of this low-hanging fruit, all these apples that are going to do for them what they want, what they really need, and spend all their energy trying to get to these high-hanging fruits that aren't actually going to solve their problem. But they're bigger, and so they look fancier, and they're going to be a cool status symbol. This exact same thing is happening with the short-term rental opportunity that exists today. People they're burnt out, they're tired, they've been going to their 9-to-5 job every day, they're living unhealthy lifestyles, they're not spending time with their family and the people they love, and there's this opportunity. They come up to this, they see this short-term rental opportunity, and it's similar to the apple tree, and it's going to solve their problems. And there's this low-hanging fruit, these markets where you can buy much cheaper, there's less competition, the ROI is much higher, and it's going to more efficiently get you to the outcome of financial freedom and creating margin in your life that you're after. But people overlook these and fight for the status symbol, the expensive markets, the mainstream markets that everyone else is fighting for, that take a lot more work, a lot more resources, and at the end of the day, they don't solve the problem that you set out to solve, which is to provide financial freedom. But hey, you got a nice big fancy apple that you can post, the pictures of your fancy listing and show off to all your friends while you still go to work until you're 65 years old. I know the return on investment in mainstream markets versus non-mainstream markets that I'm talking about is kind of hard to visualize. So don't take my word for it. I'm going to show you some examples of some mainstream short-term rental markets compared to the non-mainstream markets, some more affordable markets where this could work really well. So if you're looking at this graph here, you can see the top ones are, the Pigeon Forge cabins. That's what everyone talks about. Or Gulf Shores, Alabama. That was one of the top destinations for the last couple of years for short-term rentals. Or, San Diego, California, Orlando, where Disney World is. And you can see what the average cost is. And by the way, I pulled all this data from Zillow, City Data, AirDNA, all these different sites. And it changes day to day. So, it might look slightly different when you look it up than this does, but this is what it was when I looked it up. So the average cost of a Pigeon Forge cabin, you can see right here, is $712,000. The average nightly rate in Pigeon Forge is $283, and the average occupancy is 71%. So if you multiply the average nightly rate times the average occupancy times 365 days out of the year, you're going to come up with $73,339. So that's what you'll make if you were to rent out your average property that costs $712,000 at $283 on average for 71% of the year. So that's what you'll make in cash flow. So if you compare that $73,000 that you brought in compared to the purchase price of $712,000, you can see it's just about 10%. You're bringing in about 10%. So maybe that's what you're targeting. Maybe 10% is a good return for you. Then you've got to calculate in your expenses into this after you arrive at an average ROI. So you can follow that down and you can look at Gulf Shores a little bit better in terms of average ROI. Park City is pretty tight with that $1.9 million average cost there. And so you can see what it looks like in these mainstream markets that typically people are flocking toward. Instinctually, people are flocking toward when they're buying a short-term rental. Then you get down into the green markets, which most people probably have never even heard of. Green Lake, Wisconsin, Port Clinton, Ohio, Ottawa, Illinois, South Pittsburgh, Tennessee. These are all places in the Midwest and Southeast that are extremely affordable towns outside of larger cities that still have great ROIs. So you can see that, for example, in Green Lake, Wisconsin, I know a couple that own several properties there. And the average purchase price is $293, but the average nightly rate is $439. Now, it's very seasonal, so you're only going to rent it out 53% of the time on average, but that still equates to $84,000 or $85,000 on an annual basis, which is a 29% ROI. So some of these that are much less intuitive, some of these areas that are more affordable, much less intuitive, actually provide a much higher ROI. So finally, from a competition standpoint, I want you to look up other properties, other short-term rentals on Airbnb in some of these different markets, some of the mainstream markets versus some of the non-mainstream markets, and compare from a competition standpoint the lengths that you're going to have to go through to beat the competition in the mainstream markets versus the competition in the secondary or tertiary markets. It doesn't take a whole lot for me to be one of the first properties booked in my market versus the high-end markets where you really have to bend over backwards to be one of the top properties with all the fancy amenities that people are putting in order to attract the small pool of people that can actually afford these really high-priced properties. So I think all short-term rentals have their place, but I think it's really important to understand what the goal is, what the outcome is that you want from getting into this so that you can most efficiently match the market and the type of property with that goal and get there as quickly as possible. If this was helpful for you, hit the like button. If you want to work with me personally, you can go to the link that just popped up below me. It's also in the description. And you can set up a call with me personally, and we can talk about my program. I have a program that walks people through the steps of finding, buying, and setting up their first really high cash flowing property. And that's all we do. I personally buy properties in these really utilitarian markets where they're super high cash flowing, and that's what I teach to other people. So if you're interested in that program and you want to talk to me about it, share your goals with me, and ask any questions about the details of the program, you can set up a call with me at that link. But regardless, I hope this video was really helpful for you, and I'll see you in the next video.